The map that you have in your hand, you should actually have three maps. Pardon me. You should have three maps. I copied from two of my Bibles. One is this NIV study Bible, and the other is a Bible my wife gave me, Nelson Study Bible. And I love the Nelson, it's very good commentary. So the map on the left-hand side is from the Nelson Study Bible. The map on the right-hand side is from the NIV Study Bible. The map on the back is a more recent map. And I also have it on the Sunday school lesson, but I figured that I would try and let you have a look at it. And when I sent out the document during the week, I included that in color, which if you want to go back, you have a copy of it. It's a more recent map. Part of the reason there are so many maps is because people aren't sure of certain things. We could probably say, what does it matter? And keep going. But the controversy is, where is Mount Sinai? We know that Moses spent 40 years on the back hills of Midian, minding his father-in-law's sheep. Midian, if you can look at your map, Midian would be the landmass over here, east of the Sinai Peninsula. When you think of the fact that he was minding his father's sheep when he had the burning bush experience, you might want to conclude that maybe Mount Sinai is somewhere out here. And that's what the map, the bigger map says, that Mount Sinai is somewhere over here, close to Midian. If it is not, again, not to be controversial, just to lay the land, if it isn't, and the other two maps put Mount Sinai in the Sinai Peninsula, the southern part, it would suggest that he took his father-in-law's sheep over 100 miles when he had that experience at Horeb or Sinai. But most Bible scholars think that Mount Sinai is in the Sinai Peninsula. So it is not outside of the realm of possibility that a shepherd would wander far away with a sheep looking for pasture, knowing that it'll be a while before we come back. In fact, there's a video I show of a little girl in India. Her name is Neeraj. And in my class on Third World Economies, I follow her life from age 11 to adulthood, because they went back to the village and they tried to find her, find out what was happening. When she was 10 years old, she had had the equivalent of first grade education. And she went to school at night. Her brothers went to school during the day, but their mother said, what's the point of educating your daughters? You marry them off into another family, so what's the point? Plus, there's no work, and she was engaged to be married. At 10 years old, she was engaged in another family. So anyway, just to tell you that. But the reason that she could not continue her education is because she had to go with older siblings when they took the sheep far away, and she would cook for her brothers. And she would wander many miles, so they would come back to look for her and they can't find her because she's off grazing the sheep or helping her brothers tend for the sheep. So it is not outside of the realm of possibility that if you figure this is the life, we're going to wander, look for pastures, and wherever it takes us, it takes us. It is possible that Mount Sinai is there, and somehow Moses wandered sounds like a wrong word, but got to that place. Assuming that Horeb and Sinai are the same place, then that would be the case. So that is part of the background. Where is Sinai? Why am I talking about that and spending so much time on it? Because when the Exodus takes place, they are in the fertile area. That's where the Hebrew people were. And when they left, they had several possible routes to leave. You've heard the old cliche that the shortest distance between any 2 points is a straight line. This is the modern border of Egypt and Israel. But if you look at the map, you will see a river called the River of Egypt, or the Wadi of Egypt, somewhere over here. And that used to be the old border between Egypt and Canaan, or whatever the land was. Actually, the Philistines were up here. But that used to be the border. The River of Egypt was the eastern border. So On the bigger map, you'll see a black line, but if you had it in color, it'll be a blue line to show the river. And that was the boundary of Egypt. So that when Pharaoh is going to pursue them, he would pursue them up to this part, and once they cross into the promised land or some other land, you can't pursue them anymore. It's a different country. So you would think that the route would be, if Moses had done it on his own, he would have said, guys, we're going to be hightailing out of Egypt as fast as we can. We want to get to a safe land, across the border, and breathe a sigh of relief. And thank God. That shortcut, shortest distance would be the one to take. Part of the problem is that there were forts, military forts along the way. Egypt had military forts on that road. Can you say, no can do? If you take that path, Egypt has that staked out, at least in their part of the country. So you're not going to get very far. Since Moses spent 40 years in this region, and possibly sometime in this region, it's not outside of the realm of possibility that he said, hey guys, we're going to head down this way. And if Sinai is in the Sinai Peninsula, of course, the border of Egypt and that other land is of importance. We're just trying to escape. If it is over here, I'm getting to a point, okay? Taking a while to get there. Because there's the most impressive miracle in the Old Testament, the parting of the Red Sea. The most impressive event. The Exodus and the parting of the Red Sea, I think, defines Judaism. God rescuing his people and establishing or fulfilling that covenant. It's extremely important. Calling an annual remembrance, Passover, what God did to rescue the people. So, because there's this miracle where 2 million people crossed the Red Sea on dry land, and then the waters came and covered the 600 chariots plus all the other people from Egypt who were trying to pursue them, we need to allow space for this great miracle to take place. I should tell you, and I'm glad I'm using red, that this is the Red Sea, one branch. This is the Red Sea. This is the Red Sea. You might see these gulfs called by different names, but that is how we define the Red Sea. And if God is going to part the Red Sea, the question is where? So, is that parting going to occur somewhere here? Now that's back into Egypt. Get down south of Egypt. Somewhere down here, south of Egypt? Or is it going to occur somewhere out here? The larger map, 2006 copyright by Steve Root, and I don't know who he is. I'm not trying to claim any respect or glamour for him, because what he's doing is against what Bibles have done for many years. But Major Linda did talk about this land bridge where under the sea God had designed it. She said, I heard her say millions of years before for this escape. I was listening last night to what she said. So either it's here and Sinai is down here, or it's here, we don't know. There's some small bodies of water up here, and they're not very deep. The Reed Sea, marshy waters. And the question is, if that is where the miracle took place, how did 600 chariots get drowned in shallow waters? That would be the fantastic miracle. To find a way to cause all of these people to meet their destruction in water that's probably knee-high. So we don't know. I'm just trying to lay the land to say that the question as to where Sinai is part of the question, how do we identify where that crossing took place? So I'm going to write Canaan here, and I'm going to write Philistia, and I'm sure I'm spelling that incorrectly. So that's a little bit of the background. We know the Philistines existed in those days because on the Bible map, that's where their land is. Canaan is over here. And I should put in, I know that that's not vertical, the Dead Sea, the Sea of Galilee, the Dead Sea, in the River Jordan, because at some point they're going to have to come in, crossing the River Jordan 40 years later. So they're going to cross the Red Sea 40 years earlier and cross the Jordan River 40 years later, a smaller body of water, and they're going to walk across, pretty much. So that's not a big miracle. It's a miracle, but it is not of the dimensions of the Red Sea. It doesn't have that defining moment, but it does fulfill on the covenant promise. And I will give you a land. If you go back to one of the things that this map includes is, and you probably can't see it well, next to the river, the blue river that is now black on your map, you will see Genesis 15:18. And for those of you who know Genesis 15:18, this is the covenant promise that God makes with Abram. He said, and I will give you this land. But one of the things that is a little bit intriguing is how God said to Abram, and your descendants will go into a land and be enslaved for 400 years. Abram was told in Genesis 15 that his descendants will end up enslaved in another land for 400 years. And then God said, and I will deliver them. So deliverance is a key word here. But if you know that's in your future, it must make you a little, okay, well, all right, thank you, but here's the promised land, but my people are going to be absent from it for 400 years, enslaved in another country, and then they'll come back to this land. Some things cause you, I don't want to say angst, but worry, like, okay, well, I understand that plan, it's a little sophisticated. And last week, Carol said, well, why did Abraham say, well, just give it to us now, as opposed to having us go on this 430-year journey, including chances to doubt that God is actually their God, that he will actually deliver them. Questions come up. So it's kind of that you expect good things, and then the road gets really, really rocky. We've all been there. You believe it's going to be a smooth path, and it's not. But God. But God. He promises, and when he makes a promise, God is not a man that he should lie. He fulfills on his promise. So whatever struggles or trials you have, if you have that faith that God will come through for you, maybe you can relax a little bit. I say that knowing that when the children of Israel saw the Egyptian army pursuing them, they were saying, yeah, God got this covered. I don't think they said that. I think they were saying,
double time.
what's happening here? They're coming after us. How is this? And they just experienced a phenomenal set of incidents. The plagues. And Pharaoh saying, please go and take some of our stuff. Please go. Yeah, escape. Oh, he's coming after us again. It's like a nightmare, huh? You think it's over and it's not over. But God has a plan. The great miracle is about to happen. And I pondered, I actually started this lesson a few days ago. I told Leslie I didn't want to think about it anymore. She said, it'll be fine. God is knowledgeable, obviously. He knows how things are going to work. And if you were to look at my first question, I don't need to start getting there. But the first question, do you think that Moses knew what the tactics were? Because I don't think he did. That God said, okay, Moses, you're going to do this. And Moses saying, could you tell me? Because if you don't tell me, I'm going to plan it myself. Or we're going to take this shortcut, maybe. Oh, you can't take that shortcut because there's obstacles there. Okay, I know this area. We're going to go this area. Because I don't know if at that stage it was clear to him that when God says, and when you bring the people out, come back to this location, which is Mount Sinai. I don't know if he understood that he was, when he met at the burning bush experience at the foothills of Mount Sinai, that the plan, and if you know, please help me, the plan was to come right back, bring the people to Mount Sinai. Not clear. But anyway, that's where they ended up. So again, I think I've laid the context. He's going to take them to Sinai. The question is, well, that would rule out this path altogether then. Because if he understands that God says, and prove that I am with you, is that you're going to bring them back. So that path, I'm just going to remove that as a possibility. And say that if God said to Moses, and you're going to bring them back to Sinai, that he had to figure, where's Sinai? That's where we're taking it. And the question of the path now becomes a moot point. We're headed to Sinai. This is what God has asked me to do for you. Thank you for bearing with me as I went through that. And I said, hold your questions about it until the end. Hopefully we run out of time so you'll have no questions. Oh, yes, no.
No.
You're teasing me, right?
No, what my thing wasn't it God's plan for them to go through the Red Sea? So it doesn't matter what Moses was thinking of what direction he was going. He was being guided by God. And that was God's plan for them to go through the Red Sea to show the Lord's power to the people.
In my mind, though, he did not know they were going to go through the Red Sea.
Moses
He is
did.
thinking, okay, water.
Moses didn't, but the Lord knew.
Yes. Because if he had known that, and he told the people, oh, by the way, God is going to have to part this body of water, and we're going to walk across. They'll say, are you okay, man? Moshe, what's up? An impossibility. That's why it's going to be a great miracle.
Right. But they didn't know any of it. They just followed the pillar of smoke and fire. They didn't know where they were going. They just knew they were leaving.
My last preliminary comment, and then we'll read the context. My last preliminary comment is this. Flip to the back and look at the scripture. I'll read the first verse and then I'll stop. Then the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites to turn back. We are height turned back? We want to make a unidirectional path out here. Turn back. So when God tells Moses to tell them to turn back, I'm going to say that Moses didn't know they were turning back. Not when the enemy is behind you. I'm going to stop there then. I'm just saying that God has the plan, and Moses is just a foot soldier. Okay, you tell me what to do. Where he leads me, I will follow. I'll go with him all the way. And I believe that Moses had his doubts as well. But because of the miracle of the burning bush, and the promise that you will bring them back here, and I will, and having seen what God did by allowing his people to be brought out of Egypt, that is a phenomenal miracle in itself. He has to say, okay, well, God, you're batting 1,000. You said you're going to do it, and it's done. Plus the historical record, when God told Abraham, your descendants will go into a foreign land and be enslaved for 400 years. The 400 years has passed. And I wonder if at some point somebody was keeping the calendar and said, okay, well, we've been here for 400 years. The deliverance must be close. I don't know. The problem with the writing is that if the writing occurs after the fact, the writing can occur and make it seem like we all understood what was happening. But in the 400-year period, none of this was known. It was a history. It would become history. So enough. We're going to get started. I have my glasses. I'm going to read the session in context. And the first phrase I have is the way of Horus. That is the way, the path here, the way of Horus. It's called the way by the sea. And 4 years ago when I taught the lesson, I called it the way of the sea. It's also called the way of the Philistines. So that's the path that I have highlighted here. So I'm going to start reading at the top of the handout. God fights for his people. The way of Horus was the most direct route to the promised land, Exodus 13:17. But the Egyptians had forts along that road. So the Lord guided the Israelites along a route that took them toward the Red Sea. The Lord then directed the Israelites to camp beside the Red Sea. However, when Pharaoh decided to pursue them, this location appeared to trap them between the Egyptian army and the sea. All they could see was disaster. Then Moses said to the Israelites, this is my favorite verse, stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring to you today. Exodus 14:13. In that moment, the Israelites learned something about God they would never forget. For generations to come, Old Testament historians, poets, and prophets would recall the deliverance of Israel at the Red Sea. In this seminal moment in history, Israel discovered how God leads, protects, and delivers his people. The promise of deliverance applies as much to us as it did to Israel. The Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. Exodus 14:14. So that's our session in context. We're going to pray, and then we're going to look at 4 passages. Exodus 14, 1 through 4, 10 through 14, 19 through 23, and then we'll close off the chapter 30 and 31. We love you, Lord, and we love reading about your power, your awesomeness, and your deliverance. We love the testimony that gives us a chance to say that you've done it before and you can do it again. And if you can rescue these people, there's nothing you cannot do. Thank you for this assurance. Thank you for the promise in our own lives that once we trust in you, that you will guide us through, even when we cannot see our way. Help us to continue to trust. So bless us as we study your word, and may we leave saying we were glad we came today, for Christ's sake. When I looked at the first verse 2 actually, and I read it earlier. Tell the Israelites to turn back. That's a are you kidding me kind of moment.
Yeah.
Tell the Israelites to turn back. Because if in Moses' mind, okay, we made the plan, we're headed out, and God says, tell them to turn back. Huh? What kind of plan is it that causes you to turn back? But it is to get the enemy disoriented. Because we're going to hear that God is going to harden Pharaoh's heart. He's going to pursue. And that turning back is what causes God to part the Red Sea. Phenomenal experience. So they didn't know this was going to happen. God knew. Turn back because stand back and see the salvation, as the King James Version says. Stand back and watch the deliverance that I'm going to bring to you. And it's probably best that they not know. And have their sense of, okay, Lord, we are caught between the rock and a hard place. In my country, we say between the devil and the deep blue sea. But here between the enemy and the deep Red Sea. Coming behind you and say, okay, we're not sure what you're going to do. But God, He is going to make a way where there seems to be no way. That's a song, isn't it?
Yeah.
God will make a way where there seems to be no way. No more singing. All right, so that's a little bit of context. Turn back and camp by the sea. Do you really want to camp? I mean, how long should it take for you to camp? Maybe the first night, second night? But you have a pillar of cloud leading you out and a pillar of fire as well, which means you can travel day and night. The kids are going to get tired. The animals are going to need to rest. But you still have to have a plan. How many miles per day to get to that destination? Or to get out of Egypt proper, where he can't pursue you. And then he's going to pursue you into another country. You can't have any sense of calm. Okay, we crossed the border. Now we can relax. There's no relaxation. It's like stress, stress, stress. And you need a miracle. You need God to say and do, because there's no way in your humanity. Moses, no matter how smart you are, no can do. You need God. And you're already nervous that you don't have the ability. And God is saying, yes, you can. Well, no, you can. Yes, I can. Question number 2. Based on verse 3, what might Pharaoh have thought when he saw where the Israelites had set up their camp for that night?
That they were foolish.
Easy picking.
We're going to get them.
Here we got him. Shut in.
Yeah.
Let me just read verse 3. The Israelites are wandering around the land in confusion, hemmed in by the desert. So I looked at a few other translations. One says shut in by the desert. Another says boxed in. Trying to find another way. Lost, trapped, blocked in, closed in. These are the synonyms in the various translations. Aimlessly wandering. They're going out and they turn back. What's up? It doesn't look like you have a plan. Pharaoh is going to think you're aimlessly wandering and that he got you.
He's probably rubbing his hands saying, oh, now I got you.
Well, this is how his heart was hardened even more. Pharaoh's heart was already hard. I mean, it was stone cold hard, obviously. But God doesn't just go zap, you have a hard heart. He does it through circumstances. And so Pharaoh, who already had a hard heart, saw these people who he saw as being foolish, he could pick them up and bring them back. Well, that's how God hardened his heart.
As you read the 10 plagues, you'll see several times where it says, and Pharaoh hardened his heart. And it also says God hardened Pharaoh's heart. But as you look at the 10 different events, you'll see that phrase coming up time and time again.
And so he probably also doesn't think, I mean, these people had been enslaved, right? So he's like, we're the educated Egyptians, they're the dummy slaves, they don't know what they're doing. He probably sees them as well beneath him, but what he doesn't understand is the Lord is on their side. And so even though they don't have probably the education, experience, and the tools, except for Moses, who grew up in Egypt, so he may have been more, informed. It does look like candy baby. Okay, I want to take the candy. The baby's holding the candy. Candy baby, let's go get him. But they don't. He doesn't realize yet. But what I love about this also is that the Lord is drawing him out. So the Lord is like, we're going to do this. So when I get done, you will know it was me.
I'm going to briefly tell you a little anecdote. The national anthem in my country says, "The Lord has been the people's guide for past 300 years. With him still on the people's side, we have no doubts nor fears. Upward and onward we shall go, inspired, exalted, free, and greater will our nation grow in strength and unity." Almost sounds like an Old Testament source. The Lord has been the people's guide. We have no doubts or fears. He will lead us on. And I never thought about that until this moment. Never thought about it. Maybe the writer just said, hey, let's use Exodus and write the country's national anthem. Question number 3. I have that in 2 parts. Part A. What emotions did the Israelites show in verse 10 when they saw the Egyptian army marching toward them? Verse 10. What emotions do you see there?
They were terrified.
They were terrified. Part B of the question asks, what did Moses say? Sorry, what did they say to Moses in verses 11 and 12?
Was it because there was no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die?
Now, one of the things you have to say about the Egyptians is that they loved graves. They loved the process of mummifying a body, certainly for the pharaohs. Yeah. And they worshiped this kind of thing. They were experts at this process. Graves are a big deal in Egypt. So to say, were there no graves? Is like, you bring us here to die. So there's like a play on words there. Because they all knew that the Egyptians worship graves, loved graves. And were there no graves that you brought us out here to die in the desert? Again, back into the land of a little bit of controversy. Where exactly is that? If it is somewhere up here, close to that fertile region where they lived, this is why it's caused to think that they're far away from that. They're the desert of Sinai, as opposed to still up in that fertile area. So it is not clear if it was the day after, because how far can you go with all these 2 million people and your animals, etc., in one day, a few miles? Even if you're running, only a few miles. The little kiddies still have to be taken care of. Anyway, the point is that, okay, so much for that point. God was delivering them, and it was going to happen. But I want to talk about deliverance. There are 2 types of deliverance. There's a deliverance from and deliverance into. When I was 6 or 7, I felt I was delivered from when I prayed that prayer of confession. But there's another deliverance I'm expecting, a deliverance into God's presence. So they only got part 1 of the deliverance from. And when you get part 1, you got to look forward to part 2. You shouldn't look back to say, okay, even though you delivered us with this great miracle, torturing these Egyptians and having them give us stuff and killing their firstborn and Passover, etc., we want to be delivered back into the Egyptians' hands? Because you're going to hear them complain and say, hey, There's food in Egypt. Why are we in the desert starving? There's water in Egypt. They want to go back to slavery. So it's like the mentality is still there.
Right.
And when you get delivered, when you get saved, you don't stop sinning.
Right.
Well, eventually, you hope you process towards sanctification, but you're still the same person except for the fact that you said, Lord, I'm sorry for my sin. Deliver me from my past and deliver me into a new state of being and then into your presence, into a new lifestyle, into your presence. So the deliverance, I want to say, is a process in several parts. The deliverance from is what they experience. Question number 4. The Israelites were more focused on the enemy that was pursuing them than on God, who had just demonstrated the power and ability to deliver them. Was this a reasonable or unreasonable thing for them to do? To be focused on the past and what was behind them?
It's a human.
It was a human thing.
It's a human thing, yes.
And we do it in 2022.
Yeah, we do.
It's a human thing.
Back in chapter 5 of Exodus in verse 23, at one stage Moses says to God, you have not delivered your people. You said you were going to deliver them, but you have not delivered them. So you ask, what does deliver involve? Rescuing from, for sure, but a bringing to. All right, question number 5. How did Moses answer the Israelites? I know we've touched on it before, but how did he answer them when they started fussing and fuming in 11 and 12? How did he answer?
He reassured them.
Choose a phrase from that you would want to hold on to. Let's go around the room. Choose a phrase from that for 13 and 14 that you would want to hold on to.
The Lord will fight for you.
Yes. Yeah. Do not be afraid.
That's my line. The Lord will fight my battles. That's exactly my line. The Lord will fight my battles. Any other phrase one of you would choose in that 13 and 14?
Don't be afraid.
Do not be afraid. Have you heard of James Cleveland? He didn't bring me this far to leave me. That's one of the songs, Reverend James Cleveland. If you haven't heard of him, I commend him to you. He has a song that says, he didn't bring me this far to leave me.